The Powerline cut ran straight through the forest like someone had taken a knife to the mountain and refused to apologize for it. On either side, trees pressed in close, spruce and pine higher up, mixed birch and fir lower down, dense enough that the wind sounded different inside them. But the corridor itself was open, a wide strip cleared down to brush and stumps, kept that way by crews who came in with trucks and saws and herbicide sprayers. In summer it turned into a long lane of tough grass and waist-high shrubs. In winter it became a white channel that collected wind-blown snow until it packed down hard and bright. The towers stood along it at regular distances, steel skeletons bolted into rock, cables humming faintly when the air was cold. Most people avoided the cut unless they had a reason. It felt exposed, it felt watched. Hunters used it because it gave them sight lines. Utility workers used it because they had to. Deer used it cautiously when hunger outweighed instinct. This winter, the deer stopped crossing. The first person to notice wasn't a hunter or a biologist. It was a lineman named Oleg who had worked this route for 12 years and could read the corridor the way some people read weather. He parked the service truck at the access gate before sunrise, the engine ticking as it cooled. The air was sharp enough to sting his nose hairs. Snow squeaked under his boots. Above him, the cables made a faint, constant sound, like distant insects trapped in metal. Oleg carried a clipboard and a thermal camera, checked the lock on the gate out of habit, then walked out along the cut. He wasn't looking for deer. He was looking for ice buildup, damaged insulators, anything that could turn into an outage, but he always noticed tracks. You couldn't not notice tracks in new snow if you spent your life outside. There were none. Not along the center, not along the edges, not even the scattered prints you'd expect from a doe cutting across quickly and diving back into cover. The corridor looked swept, like nothing living wanted to be here. Oleg slowed, scanning. He found sign of deer along the tree line, small depressions where they'd stood, a few kicked up tufts of snow near shrubs they'd nibbled, but the line of open space might as well have been a river. Strange, he muttered into his scarf. Half a kilometre in, he found the wolf tracks. They were fresh, laid cleanly on top of the night's fine powder. Not a pack's chaos, not the scattered loops of a young animal exploring. A single line, purposeful, running the corridor the way a man might jog a road. The prints were large, the stride long and even. The wolf had used the cut as a highway. Oleg crouched and touched the edge of one print with a gloved finger. The snow inside it was still crisp, not rounded by wind, hours old at most. He straightened and felt the prickling sensation he always tried to ignore, the sense of being in someone else's space. A wolf could be anywhere in the forest. Everyone knew that. But a wolf choosing the Powerline cut, in daylight and repeatedly, was different. The corridor was open. It exposed an animal to sight. Most wolves didn't like that unless the benefit was worth it. Oleg walked on, eyes moving more than his head. He checked a tower base, made a note about a small ice fringe on a lower insulator string, then continued. He found scat near a clump of brush. Dark, twisted, full of hair. Not old. A marker, placed where the wind would carry scent down the corridor. By noon, the sky had turned flat and pale. The forest held its silence. Oleg returned to his truck with his notes and a new uneasiness that didn't fit anywhere on his checklist. At the depot, he mentioned it casually to a co-worker over coffee. "Deer aren't crossing the cut," he said. "No tracks. Wolves running it." His co-worker raised an eyebrow. "Wolves run everything." "Not like this," Oleg replied. "It's clean. Like a patrol." The co-worker laughed once, not unkindly. "You're seeing ghosts in snow." Oleg didn't argue. He didn't have the vocabulary for what he'd felt. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the certainty that some invisible decision had been made and the forest was obeying it. Over the next week, the pattern repeated. Each morning after fresh snow, the corridor showed the same thing. A single wolf line, sometimes two lines overlapping if the animal had gone out and come back, always straight, always confident, and always no deer crossing. On the forest side, deer tracks piled up along the edge. They moved parallel to the corridor, travelling it like a boundary, circling for a place that felt safe. They approached the open strip and turned away. Some nights they came within a few meters of the centre, then doubled back, leaving confused half-moons of hoofprints that said no more clearly than any sign could. Hunters noticed next. They used the cut to glass the tree line, looking for movement at dawn. This season they found deer on one side only. On the other side, emptiness. It was like the herd had been split by a fence nobody installed. A man named Sergei, who'd hunted this area since he was a teenager, stood in the wind one morning and watched a group of does bunch up near the edge. They lifted their heads, ears turning, bodies tense. They were not feeding. They were waiting. Sergei followed their gaze down the corridor. Nothing. No wolf visible, no motion. But the deer stayed tight, eyes wide, hooves planted, refusing to step out. After a minute, they turned as one and melted back into the trees. Sergei went home and told his brother, "There's a wolf working the cut." His brother shrugged. So the deer won't cross, Sergei said. It's like the open strip is owned. That word, owned, started showing up more often than it should have in conversations about wild animals. The biologist heard about it through a different channel, a series of trail cam photos sent to the regional office by hunters who wanted their tags adjusted. Her name was Irina. She was practical, tired, and used to human exaggeration. People always claimed wolves were everywhere, always insisted there were too many, always wanted someone else to solve their discomfort. But the photos made her pause. Night shots. A wolf in the corridor, body angled forward, tail level, moving at a steady trot beneath the power lines. Dawn shots. The same wolf, same angle, same path. Snow shots. The same clean line of tracks, repeated after each storm like someone had drawn it with a ruler. And then photos of deer at the edges, deer that approached, looked, and turned away. Irina drove out on a cold afternoon and parked where Oleg parked. She walked the cut alone, listening to the thin hum of the lines. She stopped frequently, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to notice what the deer might be noticing. Scent, she thought first. Wolves left scent posts, urine, scat, rubbed shoulders. The corridor, being open, carried smell farther. A deer stepping into it would be stepping into a stream of information it couldn't ignore. Irina found the marks, not random, but placed. Scat at intervals, urine on tall stems, a scrape where a paw had raked snow aside and exposed grass. This wasn't a wolf passing through. It was a wolf using infrastructure. She reached a tower where the ground dipped slightly, forming a natural funnel. The snow there was compacted, as if the animal had paused often. She looked up at the cables, then down the corridor. It hit her that the cut made movement efficient. A wolf could travel fast, conserve energy, patrol a long stretch in a short time, and intercept anything that tried to cross. Deer didn't need to be killed to be controlled. They only needed to believe the corridor was unsafe. Irina wrote notes in her small field book. She was about to turn back when she saw something that made her stop so abruptly her boots skidded. A deer had come out. A young buck, not fully mature, body slimmer than the older males, likely pushed by hunger and youth into taking risks. He stepped from the trees onto the edge of the cut and froze, ears forward, nostrils flaring. He scanned left and right, then took one cautious step into the open. Irina held her breath. The buck took another step. He was halfway across when the wolf appeared. It didn't burst from cover like in movies. It didn't chase. It simply materialized from the far side brush. Low, grey-brown, moving with that effortless glide wolves have, as if the ground helped them. It trotted into the corridor and stopped. Not near the deer, not charging, just present. The buck snapped to attention, legs stiff. He didn't bolt immediately. He stared, calculating distance, trying to decide if speed could solve it. The wolf did not move closer. It didn't need to. It held the corridor the way the corridor held the wind, by existing in the right place. Its head was level, its eyes were fixed. Its body was relaxed in a way that communicated more threat than tension ever could. The buck turned and ran back the way he came, hooves punching frantic holes in the snow. The wolf watched him go, then resumed trotting down the cut, unhurried, as if the encounter had been routine. Irina stood alone under the humming lines, feeling something settle into understanding. This wasn't a hunt, it was management. The wolf had learned that the Powerline cut was a lever. Run it often enough, mark it often enough, show up at the right moments, and prey would reorganize themselves to avoid it. The deer would feed elsewhere, travel elsewhere, funnel themselves into thicker cover where movement was slower and escape routes were complex. It was an invisible fence built from routine. By the time word reached the village properly, the story had hardened into something simple. A wolf ran the Powerline cut, and the deer didn't cross. People said it like a proverb, like a fact you could hand to someone without explaining the details. Oleg kept doing his route. Sergei kept hunting the edges. Irina kept collecting data. None of them ever saw the wolf do anything dramatic again. It didn't have to. After each snowfall, the corridor showed the same line, straight, confident, repeated, while deer tracks piled up at the tree line like water stopped by a dam. And the Powerline cut, meant to carry electricity across the mountain, carried something else now too. A boundary enforced by a single animal that had discovered the simplest way to control a landscape full of moving parts. The change deepened slowly, the way winter settles into a place once the first novelty of snow has passed. At first, people talked about the wolf as if he were temporary, an animal passing through, following prey patterns that would shift again, but the longer the corridor stayed empty of deer, the more that explanation wore thin. The wolf kept running the cut. Not constantly, not obsessively, but often enough that nothing large and cautious could forget him. He moved it mostly at night and in the blue hours just before dawn, when the cold tightened everything and sound carried too far to be ignored. His tracks appeared after each snowfall with the same precision, the same measured stride, like someone checking a fence line they expected to hold. The deer learned the timing. They fed hard before dusk on either side of the corridor, then retreated deeper into cover before full dark. Movement that used to flow across the cut, doe groups crossing to winter browse, young bucks drifting between ridges, collapsed inward. Trails that had crossed the open strip for decades went quiet, their entrances softening as snow filled in and no hooves disturbed it. The forest began to compress. On the west side of the cut, deer density increased. They stripped saplings lower than usual, bark scarred higher up trunks where they stood on packed snow to reach. On the east side, browse pressure dropped, and young growth survived the winter in places where it usually didn't. The imbalance wasn't dramatic yet, but it was measurable to anyone who knew how to look. Hunters adapted first, because hunters always do. They stopped posting up along the corridor and shifted deeper into timber. Stands moved. Routes changed. The cut became something you skirted rather than used. Some men complained that the wolf was ruining the area, but even they altered their habits without being asked. They felt watched there, not in a supernatural way, in a practical one. The corridor was too open, too honest. You could see too far and be seen too easily. It no longer felt neutral ground. The wolf appeared once in daylight again, late enough in the season that the sun had begun to climb higher but not warm anything. A pair of snowshoers saw him from a distance and stopped instinctively, poles sinking as they froze in place. He was trotting along the center of the cut, head low, tail straight, body loose. He did not look at them. He did not speed up or slow down. He passed across their field of vision like a thought you weren't meant to interrupt. They waited until he disappeared into brush before breathing properly again. Later, they told the story in town, embellishing it just enough to be interesting, but not enough to be unbelievable. What stuck wasn't fear, it was certainty. He knew exactly where he was going, one of them said. Didn't even glance at us. Oleg noticed maintenance was getting easier in one unexpected way. Large herbivores weren't crossing the cut anymore, so equipment paths stayed cleaner. No churned snow from panicked crossings, no broken crust from hooves slipping on ice. The corridor looked almost manicured after storms, except for the wolf's tracks, which everyone learned to recognize instantly. One morning, after a heavy snowfall, Oleg followed the tracks longer than usual. He didn't mean to track the wolf. Curiosity just pulled him forward, tower to tower, until the truck was a long way behind him and the forest had swallowed all other signs of people. The tracks never wavered. They followed the gentle curves of the land, avoided drifted pockets where snow would slow movement, crossed frozen seep lines without hesitation. The wolf knew the cut the way Oleg knew it, with a memory built from repetition. At one point, the tracks veered toward the tree line and stopped at a cluster of young aspens where deer sign was heavy, browsed tips, packed snow beneath, droppings fresh enough to steam faintly in the cold. The wolf had stood there, not chasing, just standing close enough that scent and presence filled the edge. From there, the tracks turned back to the corridor and continued on. Oleg felt the uncomfortable clarity of it. The wolf didn't need to kill here, pressure alone was enough. Irina returned twice more over the winter. Each visit confirmed the same pattern. The cut functioned as a psychological barrier rather than a physical one. The deer were capable of crossing, they simply chose not to. She explained it carefully in her reports, using neutral language. Avoidance behavior, altered movement corridors, energy conservation versus predation risk. But privately, she thought of it more simply. The wolf had found the place where effort paid best, a narrow strip, predictable prey, wind that carried information far, visibility that favoured patience over speed. By late winter, even younger deer stopped testing it. Fawns born the previous spring had never crossed the cut at all. For them, the open corridor was not a road or a gap, it was just a place you didn't go, the way animals accept cliffs and deep water without needing to understand them. The wolf showed signs of aging as the season wore on. His stride shortened slightly. One hind foot left a track that dragged a little at the toe, but his route didn't change. If anything, his timing became more precise. He moved less, but smarter. One pass at dawn, one at dusk. Enough to refresh scent and memory. Enough to keep the line intact. Snow began to soften toward the end of winter. Melt-freeze cycles crusted the surface, making movement loud and risky. Deer stayed deeper still. The corridor, once white and open, turned patchy and grey. The wolf ran it anyway. His tracks became harder to see, but they were there, pressed into slush, faintly outlined in ice. The message persisted even when the medium changed. By the time spring arrived and the first bare ground showed through, the behaviour had already set. When deer finally crossed again, it wasn't where they used to. They chose narrow brush-choked points where the corridor pinched down and sightlines shortened. They crossed in groups, fast and tense, then vanished immediately. The centre of the cut remained avoided. The wolf still ran it, though less often now. He no longer needed to prove anything. The boundary had taken root, and the Powerline cut, meant to divide forest only for wires and steel, had become something else entirely. A line drawn by repetition, held by memory, enforced not by teeth, but by the simple fact that one animal had decided to use the land better than anything else around him. The deer didn't cross. Not because they couldn't, because they knew better.